outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, the CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and I have a monumental game-changing idea. We're actually going to ask Alan in this episode of Ask Alan the podcast, and to do that is Coletta, who's riding high this week on the opening of the new Tom Lee Park, the new and improved Tom Lee Park on the riverfront. She is the president of the Memphis Parks Partnership and Memphis River Parks Partnership, excuse me. And that group, which, full disclosure, I'm on their board, have been for a number of years, is doing great things on the riverfront. And Carol called up and said, hey, I want to do Ask Alan, but I want to ask Alan some questions. So I think we're going to talk about the riverfront. Not sure exactly what Carol's going to ask me, but if Carol Coletta wants to ask me questions, I am going to answer them. So that's my promise today. I will answer the questions. I don't know how well, I don't know how truthfully, but I will have an answer. Carol, hello, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity, Alan, to ask you questions. It sounds like you're going to not be held to what you might say on the stand. Can you tell I've been watching Suits? I'm on season 8. I'm in a like I've become addicted. But I am, first of all, talking to you this week is really exciting because I think without you and without your leadership on the Riverfront Steering Committee that produced the concept, we would not be opening Tom Lee this week. So again, kudos to you for your leadership under the umbrella of our mayor, Jim Strickland, who asked you to take that role on. And we were excited you did. And I think we've come to a good place. But as you know, and I know, we are not done yet. There's lots more to do, and including that thing that sits outside your window and mine called Mud Island. So you also stepped up and co-chaired a task force that we put together on Mud Island and its future to explore the possible future options. Lots of people have ideas for Mud Island, but I think you bring a particular again, point of view and expertise, because you've dug very deeply on Mud Island, because almost 8 years ago, when Jim Strickland was just assuming his role as mayor, he gave you responsibility for Mud Island and said, what do we do with this? Again, there were big ideas in play at the time. 8 years ago, everybody was like, what do we do? What do we do? And it became your responsibility and one of your early ones in that administration. What was your assessment, Alan, of Mud Island and its opportunities and its strengths and its weaknesses at the time?
Well, at the time, I think people have to understand we were all brand new to city government. It was at that point in time where we were still learning the ropes, what our roles were, what a lot of things were. So, Mud Island was tough because we came in the middle of a process. At that time, your organization was called the Riverfront Development Corporation, and they had put out, right before the election, they had put out an RFP, request for proposals, on Mud Island. And they got back a whole bunch of proposals, some of which were half-baked, some of which were actually pretty detailed. Andy Cates had a very good proposal for using most of the island. And just to be honest with you, I think, speaking for myself, I think we, as an administration, were a little overwhelmed by all of the possibilities at that point, and we really didn't feel like we understood Mud Island or all the issues or the riverfront. And so, to be honest with you, we kind of took a pass, and that may not have been a great service to some of the folks involved in that. I'll just say some of those proposals were just cut and paste of images from all over the country. They basically said, "Hey, we'll come and do this if you, City of Memphis, subsidize it." There were some that were very well thought out. Again, I come back to Andy Cates' proposal for ecotourism on the island, and so at that point we just kind of wanted to take a step back, and we wanted to do it right. And I think one of the first things that came to me as part of that whole situation is that as a community, I think we were trying to create a facility that existed at one point and maybe didn't exist in as great a state as everybody remembers it existing. And but just be honest with you, from the administration's position, we really didn't get a whole lot of traction because there was no vision for what to do with Mud Island, and it just kind of sits there. As you say, at that time, my office was on the west side of City Hall, and I had these nice windows, and I looked right at it all day, every day. And it was clear that something had to be done, but we really were at a loss for exactly what to do.
Andy Cates' idea seemed to be unfairly caught up in this meme about yurts, and I never quite understood that. I mean, it just got reduced to some kind of silly, unfamiliar word, and didn't sound like it belonged in Memphis. But in some ways, I think back, I wasn't living here full time at the time, but it feels to me like it was sort of an unfair dismissal of the idea publicly. And as I think back on it, his approach, as you said, was interesting, was a good one, and perhaps could have worked. But it's not the only big idea that you dealt with in the Strickland administration regarding Mud Island, because I know that you spent a good bit of time sort of pursuing an idea that I think came to you on an aquarium for Mud Island, made big headlines in the front page of the newspaper, front page online. And tell me a little bit about that, because you and I've never talked about the kind of backstory on that one. Did it come to you, and why did you think that might be an idea worth pursuing?
Well, that was an idea that had its genesis in the Greensward controversy, because we were looking
at Overton Park.
Yeah, we were looking at the zoo, and there was a group of us who said, "Hey, there's a whole quadrant of the zoo that hasn't had any expansion, and there's an aquarium right in the middle of it." And Abe Plow had given that aquarium to the city, and there were some strings on it. But if you've been to it, it's not a great aquarium. I mean, it probably was in I guess the 30s when it was developed, or the 40s when it was developed. But if you took the aquarium out of the zoo, that would open up that whole quadrant for all kinds of development, which would take some pressure off of the old growth forest and some of the other places where the zoo, I don't want to say wanted to expand, but were natural areas of expansion for the zoo. So the idea was, well, let's take that aquarium and put it downtown. And that's how we started talking about an aquarium. And then the whole idea of lots of glass and being able to have an aquarium that looks out onto the river, and that kind of captures the imagination, right? So at that time, the zoo was not that interested in that idea, and a group of people who were proponents of the aquarium came forward, some local folks and some international folks. And there was a thought that private industry would be able to move the aquarium forward, and that it wouldn't have to be heavily subsidized by the city. And I think two things happened. One, I think the folks who would have been running it looked at the logistics of it. And as you know, and that a lot of people may not really appreciate, the problem with Mud Island is that it's so close to downtown, yet so far away. And it's the logistics of getting people there and promoting it, really, I think, added to the cost of operation, added to the cost of building. And that went from almost in one meeting, it went from a situation where everybody was talking about, all we would really need to do was provide a ground lease and a few things to, well, the city's going to have to come forward with a lot more resources than we really felt like we had 1 or 2 years into the Strickland administration. And, that was before the Accelerate Memphis idea. It was before a lot of other ideas that the administration came up with under Mayor Strickland's leadership to kind of create some money. But it just wasn't, again, it was really my first full submersive look at the logistical problems with Mud Island and where it is, and kind of underscored the problems inherent in making it what I'll call a citywide or regional attraction or sphere of influence.
And, in terms of the aquarium, when you talk about it, the logistical problems of getting to the island, there are also the logistical problems of getting to the end of the island, because the aquarium sort of started on the end of the island, the south end of the island, and then pulled up, through the northern part of the island. But it's a long way from where you come into the island, whether you're parking or whether you're coming over on the walk bridge, to get to the south end. And in the heat we've just had over the last month, it would be a miserable journey. And, the same is true in colder weather, because Memphians don't dress for cold. And so it is a beautifully situated piece of real estate. But like you said, it comes with a set of challenges that I don't believe people, it's easy to forget those challenges, or it's easy not to understand those challenges unless you have to operate the place. Since Mud Island was opened in 1982, I think there's always been this tension between Mud Island, which was designed to be a park, a city park, volunteer park, and it's sort of early operation as more of a theme park. You pay admission to come in. When you pay admission, you're going to get to ride this monorail, and then you get to go in this museum, and then you get to see a little show, on Mark Twain or Elvis Presley or whatever, impersonators at the amphitheater. So it was always sort of theme park without a theme park program, sort of theme park program, sort of cobbled onto a park design. And that tension has really never been resolved. And the future is quite unclear. Lots of people, as you say, have ideas for Mud Island. In your opinion, how should those ideas, Alan, be judged, be evaluated?
Well, I think the word I've used throughout this process has been sustainability. You've got to have something that is self-sustaining, or a group of uses that are interconnected and sustaining. I'll give you an example. In 2015, the city was in the last throes of the first attempt to redevelop the old fairgrounds into a tourist development zone as part of the Midtown Tourist Development Zone. And there was lots of controversy, and a lot of people didn't really understand. I didn't understand fully at the time why the thing was done the way it was. Remember there were these proposals to putting a shopping center and then a sports facility. And well, why the shopping center? Well, the reason was you had to do something that would generate money to create the increment for the tourist development zone. And the Housing and Community Development Department had a knack for just assuming a certain level of commercial economic activity and then bonding that assumption and moving forward. Well, for a lot of reasons, I didn't gain traction. And towards the end of 2015, I guess it was in the summer of 2015, the Urban Land Institute came and did a charrette for redeveloping the fairgrounds. And I was on the city council at the time, and I went to the meeting where they unveiled everything. And it was just this potpourri of, well, wouldn't it be great? I remember very clearly a wave pool at one end and some baseball diamonds, and it was just all sorts of things. The hotel kind of in the middle of it. Just essentially what the Urban Land Institute did was they got a bunch of Memphians together and said, what would be good? What would you like to see on the fairgrounds? Well, people said what they would like to see without regard to whether or not it could be sustainable. Fast forward to what Strickland did with the fairgrounds is it's now Liberty Park. It's going to have a renovated Liberty Stadium in it. He built the youth sports facility, which is going to generate tons and tons of tourism. That it's going to outdraw the projections are it's going to outdraw Graceland in 2024. That there'll be 1 million people come to that facility. And then on the other, on the north end of Liberty Park will be this commercial development that has complementary uses such as bars, restaurants, some retail, hotel, residential to support the activity at the youth sports facility and at the Liberty Stadium. And if they build the soccer stadium in Liberty Park as well. All of that is going to exist together. It complements each other, and it's a full use. It's a consistent full use of that footprint, and will spawn development around it, north, south, east, and west. It's going to be good for Cooper Young. It's going to be good for Orange Mound and the other areas immediately around it. So why do I bring that up? Well, I think that ought to be the model for what we do with Mud Island. It's essentially for the Mud Island theme park. It's essentially 52 acres of land from roughly the Hernando de Soto Bridge to the southern tip. And whatever we do ought to have I call it the 52 acre solution. There ought to be a solution that uses every square inch of that land. Some of it needs to be public. There needs to be public access, and part of it needs to be low maintenance parkland. But let's develop it in a way that's similar, where all of the uses are complementary and reflect one another and amplify one another, and maybe make it a little more regional in the sense, or sub-regional in the sense that it deals with that Wolf River Harbor. On the east and west side of Wolf River Harbor, going from the Wolf River down to the southern tip of Mud Island. And I say, think Harbor Town. I mean, Harbor Town, at the time it was developed, was a great out-of-the-box thinking kind of thing. And it takes advantage of the isolation that area has. It's near downtown, but it's not of downtown. And so some extension of that sort of development, maybe an extension of the Snuff District, or whatever's going to go on the east side of Mud Island. But we ought to be thinking about it in that terms rather than just saying, oh, wouldn't it be great to put a wave pool on Mud Island? Or wouldn't it be great to put, whatever it is, it's one thing to think of it, it's another thing to operate it. And so some I can talk about, some I can't talk about, but there have been, the first 4 years of the Strickland administration, I was involved in 4 different efforts, plus the aquarium, to do something. And these were serious people with serious capital, and they all had these ideas, and they came and they looked, and for whatever reason, their uses just didn't make sense to them as business people. And so, I think anything you do now there, I think we need to be disciplined and wait on that right development, just like we did in West Tennessee with Blue Oval. That's a big success right now, but it wasn't that long ago that people in the legislature and other places were saying that it's a waste of money. Let's just forget about it. That's the kind of thing that the right developer or the right use has to come along. And I think that's the thing for Mud Island is you could spend literally, I think you could spend $100 million on Mud Island and still not have a sustainable operation there, and not even have a gold-plated white elephant. I mean, I think there are lots and lots of money that needs to be spent just to bring what's there back up to a serviceable stint. And if the city were going to spend $100 million on Mud Island, you would want it to be world-class something. And right now, that I just don't see that as a possibility.
You said 3 things that I think are important. One is the point you just made. Mud Island is going to cost a lot more than people think it will. Number 2, you have to lean into what I call the awayness of Mud Island, because the awayness, as Harbortown has proven, can be a wonderful thing. When you go over the A.W. Willis Bridge, you really feel like you're on vacation, and you're living right near downtown, right near St. Jude Research Hospital and all kinds of job opportunities, the medical district, but you're away, and that's a lovely feeling. And you can't fight the lack of access on Mud Island. You have to say, how do we make that an asset for whatever idea comes along? And I think the third point you make, which for me was, I heard you make this a couple of weeks ago in a conversation, and I think it's a really interesting and new provocation on the table, and that is, think about the context of the harbor, because now that things are beginning to happen on the harbor, the mayor got state funds to build a number of docks. There's federal funds to build the dock at the bottom of the cobblestones. We're redoing the cobblestones. There's the lake project that the state has begun to provide some funding for at Saffron's and going north, that all of a sudden the contact, and then you've got Tom Lee right at the mouth of the harbor. And so all of a sudden, they're and Brooks right sitting up above the harbor, at Union. So all of a sudden you've got a very different context for Mud Island. And I think that's a new point. It used to feel like Mud Island was something, yes, to be treated as needs a 52-acre solution, but doesn't have to quite relate to anything else. And you're talking about the harbor as context for Mud Island. I think that's a really interesting new thought. I would argue that nothing should be on Mud Island that could be downtown. I've made that point. I don't know if you may disagree with me, Alan, but our downtown still needs to become much more robust than it is. There are lots of, we've got a lot of vacant land. We've got streets that are empty. We've got things that are not quite in the right place and need to be, densified, if you will, or certainly need to be upgraded. I would put Beale Street in that category. And so you think you don't want to do anything over there that you could do over here, but I think that begins to suggest a collection of uses over there that, again, you can't be done in downtown in the same way. So it's interesting, this and how patient. Okay, it's a political, you know this, I know this every day. Well, you need to do something with Mount Island. You need to get that amphitheater up and running. And it's very hard to get people to be patient. You're much more the politician than I am. How do you get people to be patient?
I don't know. I think that is the flaw in my argument, because you can be patient about Blue Oval when it's out in the middle of nowhere, and it really isn't costing anybody any money. Mount Island does cost money, and it's in this limbo state where it's a drain, but at the same time, it's not doing anything. So I think the first step is people will be patient if they agree that this is the way to go. If they see the wisdom in the 52-acre solution, and they have confidence that somebody, whether it's the partnership, the city, the chamber, state legislature, Santa Claus, whoever it might be, that somebody is working on this, and that there is something going on. And that's why I say you shouldn't preclude, short-term uses of the property, spur interest in it. But it's, as months and years go on and nothing changes, then I think people justifiably say, well, okay, this isn't working. We need to come up with something. So I think you got to be patient, but at the same time, those of us who are responsible for making the needle move need to make the needle move. And but again, you said something that you're much closer to than I am, that people just have no idea what kind of money they're talking about. I think most of my friends say, well, it's just put a coat of paint and some Bondo out there, and that amphitheater be fine. Well, it's not. I mean, there's probably about $20 million worth of work that has to be done in the walls. You're not talking about building anything new or making any seats new. You're just talking about $20 million of deferred maintenance and decay that's going on over there for the last 40 years. That's before you do anything cosmetic. And I'm not sure you could, if you think about that amphitheater, it is kind of perched on the edge. One of the things that makes it nice is it's on the edge of the island and it looks towards the mainland. And that's what everybody talks about. Well, that makes it a tough venue because in 1980, James Taylor could walk out there with a stool, put it down, and start playing his music, and that was a concert. Well, now even James Taylor needs 2 or 3 semi trucks full of equipment and whatnot to do a concert. Well, you can't back up one semi trailer, much less 2 or 3 at a time. It's just the whole infrastructure is. What other venue is 40 years old and still in use? Even the Orpheum has had a couple of backstage upgrades since it was redone in the 80s. So that's just one example of something that, it'd be great to have a great venue there in theory, but who's going to subsidize?
Yep.
There's not a single venue like that, including the Forum, including the Orpheum, including Snowden Grove, and all that don't operate at some sort of operating deficiency, and they're all subsidized by somebody. And I've seen the city's budget. There isn't millions of dollars that's just sitting there that can be used to subsidize something like that we don't need to for repaving the streets or paying for police officers or fire departments or other parks or just all of the things that people want their government to do. So I think that really will force hopefully people to be patient until we can really come up with the right answer.
All right, one more question, Alan. You've told me what we can't do, right? Or you've told me about the constraints. What can we do? What do you see as next? A positive next step to show and to show progress and to get us to a good future for Mud Island.
Well, I think we need to speak with one voice about Mud Island. Whether it's the partnership, which probably right now is contractually obligated to, you're the person supposed to wake up every morning, among other things, worried about Mud Island. And so, the partnership probably needs to put together a program to start marketing ideas of a holistic nature. It would be nice, I don't think this is going to happen, but it would be nice if there was some discussion of Mud Island during the city elections, both at the city council level and the mayoral level, to try to get some sort of consensus on what we should do. And I think as people come to us with solutions, we need to say, okay, how does this fit into a 52-acre use of Mud Island? And I think you've got to ask a potential developer, right, how much money are you going to put up? Because there are a lot of people that say, well, yeah, you give me the amphitheater and you spend $20 million on it, and you operate it, and I'll book the acts, and I'll take 15% off the top. Well, yeah, sign me up for that with no risk and a reward. But it's got to be something that's sustainable. And I think you could continue the development, the residential and commercial development that's going on at the north end. You could bring that through. There's been some talk of trying to find a corporate use for it, maybe some large new age or new gig economy kind of employer to put a signature business campus out there. There's been some talk about university putting a water studies facility out there. I mean, there are all kinds of things that could happen, but I think the idea of it being a tourist attraction is an idea for yesterday. And I think the future is something more localized, sustainable, and maybe at a lesser scale than some of the ways we've kind of come to think about Mud Island.
Yeah, one thing you said, just to emphasize this, Alan, you're right. I think we've been constrained by its 1982 reality of it was for tourists, and it really wasn't designed for tourists. But it became necessary when we were going through the inflationary period and cost rose so high on the island, and it's like, oh, we've got to show that it produces revenue. But I think to make the changes we need to make, you're right, the money probably won't come from government, therefore. And I don't think it will come from philanthropy. I think you've really got to have some commercial or institutional investment. And so, so to be continued, because that is, it's big enough you can't ignore it. It's out there. And it's such an difficult but intriguing piece of property that really in so many ways is unmatched. So I look forward to working with you on the future of Mud Island, and hope we can come up with something as powerful as Blue Oval has been in West Tennessee. That would be great to anchor the front door of our city.
It would. It'll work out. It all works out. There's a great movie, Shakespeare in Love, and if you ever watch that movie, one of the characters is the producer, the guy who runs the theater and director. And he always says, well, it's going to work out. And they say, well, how do you know? He says, it's a mystery. And it's a mystery. And if you've ever been involved in the theater, that's even funnier than you think. But it'll work out somehow. But we've all got to be intentional about it. And I appreciate what you've done on the river, and I've just enjoyed being kind of having a front row seat for it and doing what I can, because the riverfront in downtown is so important to Memphis. And even if you live out in the eastern part of the city or the county, and you really, it's not part of your day to day. It's just like when you think of New York, you think of Manhattan. When you think of St. Louis, you think of the Arch. When you think of Seattle, you think of the Space Needle. When you think of Memphis, you think of Beale Street and the river and barbecue. So it's important for our national brand, and it's also important to have places that belong to all of us, not just a part of us. And the riverfront and downtown certainly belong to everybody in the city.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me take your chair today. I enjoyed asking questions. Questions are us. I love questions. So, and you are always, you're always so quotable, and you are so smart about the way government, what the role of government is and how government can play at the table without necessarily bringing all the money and all the direction to a project. And Mud Island, in a lot of ways, I think looking back on it, suffers from being an all government entity. And I respect government. I, like you, was in government. In fact, I was in government when Mud Island was conceived. But it's one of the great, as you said, it's a mystery, but it's a fun mystery and so full of potential. So again, I look forward to being your partner. And again, thanks for letting me take the chair today.
Well, thank you, Carol, for doing that. And I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope this was interesting. It's an important question, and it's one that, like a lot of things, deserves a lot more reflection by the public than maybe the public is inclined to do, but it is important. And so Carol is going to go back to developing the riverfront for everybody, and I'm going to go get some justice. Thank you all very much.